In general, doula trainings are a support for families that have a labor and birthing plan with specific goals, a certain environment that they want to have. But for Black women, women of color, but primarily Black women, it is not a bow on an otherwise gift package. It has literally become a necessity just to combat poor birth outcomes. Because even here in the great state of California, Black women, Black babies are anywhere from 2 to 6 times less likely to see their first birthday of the baby, more likely to have a death or near-death experience, even higher percentage than that or higher numbers than that, to experience implicit and overt bias in the birthing setting. Now, where does this come from? Does everybody who work in obstetrics and gynecology just have it in for Black women and not want them to be successful in their birthing plans? Obviously not. It's not, most often, it's not an individual provider problem. It's a systemic problem. And the reason that I say that it's systemic, that it's rooted in to the very beginning of the study of obstetrics, where they abused a Black woman's body to do their tests and figure out their procedures without any sort of pain management, because the deep core belief they had was that she was not human enough to experience that as pain. How that plays out today, that somewhere there's this deeply rooted belief that we can handle a whole lot more before a situation is emergent, which is why so very often a Black body can be in crisis, report the crisis, and not have the crisis be addressed. The other side of this is the very real phenomenon of ancestral scarring. And I say this on both sides of the melanin scale, because in the times where our bodies were enslaved, there was a level of fear, and the way that people managed their fears through violence. And so there was violence against Black bodies in order to incapacitate them physically and emotionally, spiritually, however you want to call it. That is still the practice today. We want to tone police. We want to keep people quiet. We want them not to respond to the pain or threat of anything, and especially not racism or racist systems. So when you think about how often a birthing body of someone of color is silenced and tethered and immobilized, and we just call it medical care, you can recognize that there's a system at play, but there's also things that come up that aren't addressed, right? Like, what does it mean when there are a group of people who don't look like you gawking at your naked body while you are tethered to something of their making and incapacitated? The same thing it did for your great-great-grandmother when she was on a block. And people are making money off of this. Less philosophical than that and more concrete than that, there is this idea that only certain people are in quote-unquote good enough situations to reproduce. And it is why you hear about and see empathy displayed demonstrated for middle class white women who are struggling with infertility, but no real conversations about Black women struggling with infertility, even though the challenge, any challenging situation for us, the statistics are higher, right? But somewhere in our collective national thinking, Black women shouldn't have babies. Black bodies shouldn't be reproducing. And so you run into your first diagnosis in pregnancy of being Black. That's the first thing that's wrong, right? The first reaction to that pregnancy is that it was somehow a mistake. Can we correct it? Can we undo it? Can we stop it? Can we prevent it? Can we prevent it permanently, right? And in the course of healthcare these days, can we hurry up and get it over with this move towards forcing bodies to deliver before the body and the baby signal that they're ready, that the development is full, right? So if a baby comes 2 weeks early and doesn't have the same amount of time to develop lungs, develop brain, develop the physiological systems that will maintain its life on the outside, when it's born, it's going to have more challenges than a baby that had more time to develop those things. And that's not counting the messages for survival in this world that baby's womb told it based on the mother's environment. And we might understand that if the mother's environment is Black. But the same thing happens if the mother's environment is not Black. In other words, if she's higher up the socioeconomic ladder, it does not make a difference in birth outcomes if that womb happens to be wrapped in Black skin. Because of stress, because of racism, because of ethnic isolation, the higher up you go, the less of you yourself you're going to see in what we deem success, right? The more residual stress your body's going to retain, and that stress is going to impact your pregnancy, which makes those bodies deliver typically 2 weeks early. We can look at that with statistics and see that Black babies average 6.5 pounds and national average is 7.5 pounds because our babies tend to come early. And you can tie that all the way back around to the stress of systemic racism. So that's kind of the history. Because it's so very normalized, it's invisible. I cannot tell you how many times I've walked into a birth setting, and at that point, with a Black birthing mother, I'm the second Black person in that space, and no one ever noticed that she was isolated. While there may be people that think that's not a big deal, you'd have to wonder what the opposite scenario would create, what kind of response it would create. You remember the lady in the color purple when Sophia was supposed to be teaching her how to drive, and she was all of a sudden afraid, surrounded by all these Black bodies, and she freaks all the way out. Right. So you kind of know that if the situation were reversed and in a mainstream setting, a white birthing mother only had people who did not look like her surrounding her, making decisions for her body, it would not be seen as the norm. When I walk into that kind of a setting and the care providers that are present don't even notice that that's what's happening, you know that this thing that is very, very wrong is invisible because it's normal. Normal doesn't make it right. It just means they can't see it. And in this whole conversation so far, I haven't mentioned anything about the fathers. There is this sort of national reputation that has been assigned to Black men that they are not present for their children, even though statistically they're the most likely to be involved in their children's lives. And you see that reputation, ill-fitting, but reputation, play out in the engagement of medical staff coming into birth settings. I literally have to so often bring dad forward, bring him into the conversation, bring him to their attention, because they no more paid attention to him than the rocking chair he was sitting in. It creates a pause, it creates a shift as the realization kind of kicks in that whatever amount of time this family has been here, they've not engaged the father. This does not happen with my Caucasian clients. There are other differences, like the line of questioning that Black moms receive over and over again. You know, are you receiving subsidized this, subsidized that? Are you feeling safe in your environment? Is anyone threatening you? Is anyone making you feel scared? You know, over and over again. It does not happen with my Caucasian clients. They are not questioned about the safety of their homes and the implied presence of Black males in their homes, or males in their homes for that matter. This only happens when it's not the power majority demographic in the room. There is this idea where culture gets mixed up with what's right and what's wrong. Preference gets mixed up with what's right and what's wrong. There are times where I've had to call it out when a staff in a birthing setting assigns their own preference to the environment for the birthing person, when actually the birthing person is the person who gets to determine what is their comfortable laboring space.
Right.
And for us, it's not nobody else there and the whole room is quiet. Generally, we want our people, right? We want our folks. And that dastardly COVID pandemic has really given an opportunity for these biases to run unchecked and drive policy. So now you've got families who are disrupted in their dynamic because the hospital's preference, the caregiver's preference, is for the birthing person not to have their community present. You think about a newly postpartum mom who has to go home and deal with people who are hurt from not being in one of the most important moments in her life, because she actually had to choose between the baby's father and her mother and who could be with her in labor. Or someone is asked to leave and they want to blame the spread of COVID, but these are the same people that have been breathing on her for the last 40 weeks. So they don't increase her risk. If I brought you to the hospital in my car, we are already exposed to the same things. So me not being allowed in with you does not protect you or anyone else. But that's the reason given. And it allows preference to drive policy. And the well-being of the birthing person is not what's considered. It's one of those things that started a long time ago, but it never stopped. It just evolved. And that's what I had to say about that.
Well, good. That's good information. So describe the doula training. What is it that is being done, and how does the activity address the issue?
Every doula training is going to have your basics, your physiology of birth, the understanding of fetal development, the understanding of the body's changes, and then the process of getting the baby from the inside to the outside, and all of the ways to support that with movement, with position, with massage, with all of the coping measures that help with labor. And this is whether the mom is intending to have pain management or not, because the doula training also covers the effect and impact of different types of chemical pain management, with the narcotics, with the numbing medications, all the different canes that they have out there, lidocaine, etc., and how those impact the birth at what different stages of labor. Also, hospital protocols, their responsibilities, and things like grief that can come up, things like postpartum care and support, the emotional changes that happen, helping families adjust to a new, very tiny, very dependent, very demanding family member, support with breastfeeding, support with all of the things that come with that. Now, that's your basic training, right? These days, we also have COVID protocols thrown in because, it's a thing. And with that comes different types of support, telehealth, things that weren't as complicated before the whole planet got the cooties. But also in the training that you're enrolled in is the element of cultural humility, cultural competence, cultural relevance, for supporting birthing families. Also the idea of advocacy and ways to do that. Things like interviewing clients when you are determining whether or not you can take a family into your practice, whether you work through an agency or you have a private practice, or you're volunteering your support in the to get your certification. All of these things are a part of that training. And then there's this part about understanding community resources and knowing that as a part of a birthing care team, you're going to spend the most hours with your client compared to other members of the team, and have the most insight on that person's personality, their needs, their pros and cons, their fears, their risks, their home life, their needs, right? And so you would have to have a pretty firm grasp on what you do next. So if you met this mom, at whatever stage in pregnancy, and she's got a spotless home, right? And you come 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 months after her delivery, and her house is a whole mess, you would be the one to know that's not like her. Like, that's not normal for her. Ask some more questions, get some understanding, sit with her, get her into care, make the referrals, right? And each doula decides what she includes in her service package, I guess, for lack of a better word. But the person who has spent time with you and has seen you on both sides of pregnancy and delivery can recognize those kinds of changes and get you to the help that you need, right? And talk you through it, sit there with you. If you and the baby are crying at 3 a.m. because breastfeeding latch isn't happening and you don't know why, and you're afraid that your baby's not getting enough to eat and someone's threatening you because your baby is not gaining enough weight, probably it's not your OB that's coming. It's going to be your doula who's sitting with you in the middle of the night and helping you master that latch and getting you to even more advanced lactation specialists if such a thing is warranted, and who in the community would be a good match for you. Because if you live in the hood and the lactation specialist is in some neighborhood where your car is going to get followed by the local security on your way there, it's probably not going to be a great fit, right? But someone who shares your experience and has the expertise is going to be a better fit, right? And be able to help and address those needs. So learning to recognize things, learning to make the referrals to the resources, learning to provide care through a format of relationship is very, very different than other things in managed care. And that, among many other things, will be what the doula training addresses. The Birthing Project USA doula training specifically was designed because of the drive to end birth disparities in the BIPOC community. And so we doula in the spirit of sister friends.
First, where do you find a doula? And I'm a Medi-Cal. I can't afford a doula. That's a lot of money. How does that work?
These days, we have this thing called social media, and that makes it a lot easier. You could literally go to your Facebook and do a search for doulas, local doulas, or whatever specialty you're looking for, whatever kind, full spectrum doulas, postpartum doulas, all of that. You can add modifiers that narrow it down by ethnicity or by zip code or by whatever it is. You can do that. But I find that I have the most success connecting with clients through a warm handoff. In other words, somebody that knows somebody knows me. And they trust me with their person. And that's how I get those connections. That even working with a larger organization in partnership with a larger organization that has people whose job it is to refer birthing clients who express a desire, want, need for a birth coach, for a doula, I still get all the brown bodies, black bodies from the community. And I think that's significant. I think that there is a connection that matters, that is valuable. So all that to say, ask your people. Ask your friends and family who they recommend, if they had a doula, if they wish they had a doula. Even somebody who just is always that one auntie that's at everybody's birth, send her to go get trained. Like, find a local training. You can look online, you can look on the different certifying organizations and see who they've posted in their area. A lot of the hospitals prior to COVID started to have kind of a doula volunteer pool. But the truth is, most Black women can't do that number of hours, the kind of care that we provide, on call for a free volunteer pool, and it doesn't allow them to build their income through the rest of their private practice. In other words, if they're doing the volunteer work as a doula, then it has to stay volunteer work through those systems. And they don't tend to have a lot of diversity within the volunteer pool. And a lot of the training that they have is hospital-based care. And it's good that they know what's happening in the hospital, but also it is the hospital's viewpoint that is the expectation for the care to be rendered. And if you're a hospital-based volunteer doula, you are meeting this person in labor. Not that you can't support somebody, not that it doesn't happen. I've literally been called to births, like at crowning, got there, bonded quickly, and provided that support. But I think the answer goes back to your best bet is to ask your community who they recommend, who they know that does this work, who they know that had a doula, what was their experience, and all of that. And you can start with the search and go from there.
The next training is coming up when?
It is October 14th, 16th, so just under 2 weeks now. And the initial training is a 20-hour intensive. And over the next 12 months following, there are monthly supplemental gatherings where experts in the field will come and present and just add the ongoing education that every birth worker seeks and gathers. Things change a lot. Things change quickly, as we noticed with COVID. You could be at the hospital under one policy, and by the time you left, there was a whole different policy in place as far as who could support and when and where. So yeah, the training is those first 20 hours and then the ongoing support and education, at which point, and this is where you have impact with your action to take the training. You support 4 births over the next 18 months to give not just the technical support, but the social support, and pour those hours back into the community. So you literally, at the end of certification, have 80 hours minimum that you have poured into birthing families in your community. And you can imagine how far 80 hours goes.
Yeah, that's a lot. So, and then the final question, how often are these trainings put together from your end?
On my end, we do at least 2 a year in Birthing Project, a spring and a fall. This year, we will try very hard to get another kind of Christmas bonus training in to round out the year. But doula trainings happen all over the place all the time. Whether you're going big brand name training or whether you're going, there are various trainings across the country and around Western type civilizations. You can get trainings all over. You really do your research to find out if the training is a good match for the population that you want to serve, right? If it offers the things that you will need within your service space. If you're going to be providing care to Spanish-speaking families, you probably want a training that is in that language and that addresses how things are within the culture, so that you're not oblivious to things that are very, very important for the families that you support, so that you're aware of the experiences, because supporting a birth within a migrant family is going to look very different than supporting a birth in a family that has all private insurance and all private providers and has hired a nanny to stay and be there through the night, the first however many months or years, right? There's going to be 2 different types of support that you're offering, even though the physiology of birth is consistent. The culture is where the variance happens.
Final words of wisdom for people that are thinking about, considering, want to know more. What are your words of wisdom in regards to people connecting, people learning to become a doula?
So I will tell you, doulas are born, not made. And so if you feel that call tugging at your heart, at your mind, then and you may not have even have had words for it. You know, when I was told to go get trained as a doula, I did not know what that meant, but I had just done it with a mom that I didn't know and had been sent to go help, and I was like, wait, what? But at the end, the nurse was like, you should go get certified. It is, if it's there for you, it's there. And yes, the trainings offer the technical support, the curriculum, the, you know, the things that you can't know intuitively, but there has to be that element of you that is intuitive, that is willing to lose sleep to make sure that a baby gets into the world safely, that is willing to see all of the things that happen within families and intense situations, that is quick on the feet, does not panic, does not, you know, I mean, you can have your internal panic, but externally, you're working things out. The person who is kind of the labor choreographer in that room when it comes to shifting around and the supports and who's doing what, and being able to read someone's body and know where they are in the process. Because, you know, we don't do medical stuff. We don't do pelvic exams and those things, right? So that means you've got to be able to read someone who's in labor from the outside to know where she is in that labor, right? And hold space for her plan that she had before any sort of discomfort ever even began. So that is my word of advice, that if you feel the call, go explore it, right? It's good information to have if you're on the other side of that care providing team, if you're a person who is on the medical system side, to fully understand the community side, the social support side, and to be able to offer both is incredible. It is incredible. I've seen it, and it just makes my heart sing when you've got someone who is becoming a midwife, or who's a nurse practitioner, or who's something else within that medical field, who offers work on that side, to also have the skills and knowledge base from this side, from the client-centered set of priorities. Because I know if I'm working for my job while I'm on the clock, that job's protocols and processes are the priority, right? That's how I get my check. But what I love on my end is that I get to support my clients' wishes and dreams no matter what. And so to be able to recognize what's happening on both sides and offer real talk, you know, like, I know that you wanted all natural and butterflies and glitter for this birth, but also your baby's heart rate is not reactive enough, and so we need to do something different, right? Like, here are some options, here are some alternatives. So to be able to sit with your feet in more than one world, and offer support is insanely valuable. We need more of that. We need more people who are bicultural when it comes to birth and bodies and medical systems and medicine and science and statistics and hearts and all of the things, family dynamics, cultural experiences, resources or the lack thereof. We need folks who are lived life experts coming into that environment and being able to offer support, hold space for respect, hold space for bodily autonomy, hold space for literally, out of all the times and places to have the right to choose, the birthing setting should be the primary one, right? It's a job that can only happen in that way. So that's advice I have. If you have that call in your life, investigate it.
Well, awesome. Being a doula has definitely been on my bucket list. So what better time than now I've been putting it off and putting it off. So
Yeah.
to bring it back around to actually having to write a paper about trauma, and the focus being trauma in healthcare, and more specifically during child labor for giving birth with Black women, because we experience so much trauma. You know, we experience trauma when it comes to our hair, as we sit here. You know, you're doing my hair while we're doing this. We have that kind of trauma. We have, you know,
we come pre-traumatized.
we come pre-traumatized already, hot and ready.
Just add water.
Right, exactly.
Just add
All
water.
right.
Activate the trauma. There it is. Right.
So this is definitely gonna be an exciting thing for me, even though the actual event will be after my paper is already written, but I'm gonna write it up to that point. So, all right.